I'm a pastor, and I've been so now approaching 40 years, with one church in one community, the flagship of the so-called Black African American people, Harlem, New York City, and have enjoyed a large measure, if you will, of godly success in having done so. I want to, out of that experience, to try to explain something that I pray that will help humanity under this subject rubric of understanding Blackianity, trying to come to understand why black people act or think the way they act or think. And so we call it Blackianity, such as Christianity, so that perhaps this can bring some semblance of, if not peace, or at least an opportunity for better interaction and even a better dialogue of why black people act the way they act. And I think culturally, most people from their various cultural roots have a particular genre or demeanor of their behavior, whether it be Chinese or Indian, Muslims, or black people. They all have a particular behavior pattern. The problem is with Blackianity, or with so-called black people. Now, black is not who they are. That is not they're who they are. Neither is African American. They are biblically Hamites, from Ham, the second oldest son of Noah in the book of Revelation, or Genesis rather, chapter 9. They are Hamites. They are born of that genre. Pardon me. And white people are not white people. That's a misnomer as well. They're known as a third son of Noah, known as Japheth. And the Jewish people come from Shem, the oldest boy of Noah, the Shemites or the Semites. So having said that, I want to try to give you my 40 years of experience of dealing particularly with black people, and preferably it will be an offering that will help in some way to bring some semblance of understanding, if not peace. First of all, I was, on yesterday, I made mention of the fact when Elizabeth and I traveled to Liberia in Africa, going back several years ago, back in the early 80s. And one of the first encounters that we had was with a African theologian, I suppose he calls himself, who who took us to a lecture that evening there in Monrovia on the idea of the Greek term of kairos and chronos. And these are two Greek terms indicating a segment of time. And he wanted specifically to talk to us about that as it relates to Blackianity or African culture and understanding. And the kairos, of course, Greeks themselves, and the alphabet itself being based in Greek ideology, a Greek structure, that chronos represents the chronology of the way things evolve. Like, for instance, chronos says that Tuesday at 8:03 is a chronological. It's the chronology of it, and then 8:04, 8:05, and they're all in place. They're all at their appropriate designation. That's time. That's what time is. Or in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's chronos. That's time. That's a fact of time. It's the event that the whole world, except for black people, respond to. Chronos, chronology, the event, the time itself. Kairos is another ideology expressed of time as when I decide to respond to whatever might have been the calling. For instance, 8:03 on Tuesday morning may have been a time that a person was summoned to be at court or summoned to be at church. But Kairos says, I'll get there when I get there. With a full and complete understanding of brain and mind that they are well aware that they're supposed to be there at 8:03. But there is a systematic understanding in the breakdown of the way their brain works that says to them, well, when I get there, I'll be there. And as far as the world has been able to determine, according to this lecturer in Monrovia, is that that's how African and black people in general are. So when you look at black people and African people in particular being late, understand they knew they were supposed to be there at 8:03, but they have a religion of Kairos that says, I'll be there when I get there. And it is as powerful as any ideology. It isn't that simply they're being obstinate. That's just their pattern. That's just the way their brain works. They'll be there when they get there. It's Kairos, not Chronos. Having said that, and everybody knows that African people and black people are late. They know it. That's not something that I'm dredging up to try to point a finger or broadly smear black people. It's called Blackianity. That they separate themselves from the rest of the world on Kairos. That's just who they are. And it's a religious perspective that is not easily changed or corrected, which has so many other debilitating effects in terms of jobs, appointments, education, etc. You just go right down the line. Because if you're not in Chronos, you're living on a different planet, which makes Blackianity or black people's lives on a different planet, on a different plane. And so you can't work with them as you would with other folk. Having said that, with respect to understanding Blackianity, I wanted to get started there. But did you ever wonder why Mexicans don't like black people, don't want to have anything to do with them, don't want to intermarry with them? Why that is so? Or why the Japanese are very restrictive and guarded about the number of Blackianity or African Americans that they allow in Japan. You can call it racist or whatever you want, but that is a Japanese idea. Or the same thing with Russia, for instance, that many of these Eastern European nations and Eastern nations as well have a great disdain for black people. They don't want them in their nation. And even Mexicans don't want black people in their nations. The Japheth man, for whatever reason, and mainly because of the idea of his cheap labor, and oftentimes the black man has been enslaved in the Japheth ideology, just like in America or in Europe as indentured servants, has allowed a large populations of blacks to come into Europe or into America. But the Japanese and others who don't need that kind of labor or indentured servant or slavery have depopulated black people from their experience, mainly because of the cultural mindset of black people does not measure up to the standards of discipline of Japanese. Black people generally, even with their PhDs and their MDs, are generally very laissez-faire. That is a French word for saying that, that's kind of hanging loose. They're loosey-goosey. They're not very disciplined. They're not very structured. And then the other aspect of that is that trying to get them out of their natural habitat of being laissez-faire or loosey-goosey to become rigid and disciplined and very focused evokes a lot of fights. They don't like it when Blackianity or black or African American people don't like it when you try to make them as rigid as a Japanese or a Jew. They don't like it. They don't like it, and they resist it. And are very stubborn about wanting to stay, and are very comfortable, and they want to bring the world down to their Kairos point of view. Blackianity, African American, wants to bring the world down to their Kairos point of view. They want to destroy Chronos and bring their world down, bring the whole world down, and everybody loosey-goosey, everybody laissez-faire, without a focus and a very disciplined approach to life. And so as a result of that, we find ourselves, this creates different planetary ideals and people living in two different universes. Blackianity, African Americans or blacks, live in a different universe. They live in different communities. They live in very different ideologies socially. Now, I've been able to study this, and my first study of this happened in Africa, in Liberia, one Tuesday night. But I've been a pastor for 40 years. The woman that paid, or that was able to get Princeton University to pay for my studies in Africa, said her name was Grace. She was a counselor at Union Seminary. She said to me, James, she says, I've been watching you. And she says, and I just gotten there just the first semester. She said, you need to go to Africa with this study. I said, why? She said, because you're a pastor. We know that you are here at the school. And I think because you're a pastor, what you're going to learn in Africa is going to greatly benefit you in the years to come and greatly benefit the people of who you're going to serve in Africa. So they gave me, the Union and Princeton paid for my trip to go to, all expenses paid. As a travel study in Africa. And my first thing that I learned was about the fact that Blackianity, or the black people, live in a Kairos world. And the rest of the universe lives in Chronos. And so that within itself brings an equilibrium of attention between the two. And therefore, even it's something as perhaps as broadly understood as police brutality, or racism itself in any genre, happens because the fact that there's already a Kairos understanding of Blackianity and the way black people perceive the world. And so the rest of the world rejects black people. Mexicans reject black people. Japanese reject them. They are rejected. So as a part of the rejection stimulus, it creates tension. So therefore, Japheth people, who are the white people, reject Blackianity, and so therefore the rejection causes the two to fight one another all the time. It isn't racism, it's rejection. White people reject the lifestyles of Blackianity. And Blackianity people reject the lifestyles of the Chronos, Japheth, and Shemite world. It's rejection. It's not racism. It's rejection. Then the other thing about Blackianity is that, and this is a recent phenomenon, as I made mention the other day, that when we were Negroes, this was not the phenomenon. And Marcus Garvey, whose major movement was called the Negro Improvement Movement, where he lauded and praised the idea of the Negro. But later it was changed from Negro to black. But the thing I think that happened after the Marcus Garvey era was that blacks began to call themselves black and form the religion of blackness. That their whole idea is that, like, Jews are Jews and Christians are Christians, and then they have a religious ideal that supports their Jewish or Christian ideology. Blacks worship being black. For them, it's all about being black. But and one of the commandments of the structure of the understanding of black people is that they are victims, that we were once slaves. I mean, black people have built an entire religion on the fact that we were once slaves in America, and they still want us to be slaves, and we want to have our right. For instance, if you look at the Jews who were slaves in Egypt, and of course, they've been set free by Moses and conquering the land and becoming Jews in Israel and all of that. But the foundation of that, but not in a negative way. The Jews aren't negative towards Egypt. They're not even negative towards Hitler and Germany, which is more recent. But black people have a religion based on slavery. If you're going to deal with black folk, you have to understand that they have a separate religion, separate from Christianity, but that is more valid, more real. Black people's religion of Blackianity is more real than Christianity. It's more real than Judaism. It's more real than Islam. Blackianity, all based on we were slaves, we were victims, we were mistreated. And this phenomena, however, was given birth to in the mid 70s, the early 70s. So when you approach black folk, I don't care who they are, whether it be Eddie Glover, Cornel West, or Michael Eric Dyson, or any of them, when you approach them, you have to understand they worship a black ideology, Blackianity, and they're deeply ingrained in it. It's a part of why they try to integrate themselves into a larger society. Their whole idea is based on Blackianity, and their religion is that we were once slaves and now we're victims, and the white man has done us wrong, done us wrong, done us wrong. And then if you don't understand that, you can understand, well, how can a man like, Michael Eric Dyson or Eddie Glover, how can these people with PhDs be so base and racist? First of all, it's their religion. It's their Blackianity. It's the fact that they reject Chronos. They reject the worst, they even reject Christianity. At one point, in the 70s, the late 60s and the 70s, at one point, black people were even rejecting Jesus and calling him white and blue-eyed and blonde-haired. I mean, it was a major movement. Now, it's quieted down of late. But at one point, Blackianity was so powerful and so pervasive that Christianity itself was rejected simply on the basis of the fact that Jesus was alleged to be white with blue eyes. It's not true. So I think we're going to understand what's happening in our world today, and God has sent me to teach. If we're going to understand the black man, it isn't racism, it is rejection. His lifestyle, his ideas, his sausage brain, his cultural development is rejected by the rest of the world. Even Mexicans reject black people. They don't want to have anything to do with them. Japanese reject them. Everybody on the planet rejects him. That's why he's not welcome. And he, on the other hand, rejects the rest of the world. He rejects. You can say to him, be here at 1 o'clock. He ain't coming. And he'll show up at 1:15 or 1:30. And then what's why you got an attitude about his show. In his mindset, he said, well, I was trying to get here. But in his mindset, his religion, a Blackianity. And then, of course, if you say he should be responsible, then you are saying to him that you want me to be responsible to glorify you. And therefore, he then retreats back to slavery, back to lynching, back to, and then the other item, of course, is that the mistake that Chronos people did, the Japheth, the Shemites did, was to give him affirmative action. The Chronos people then said, which was a grave mistake in the 70s, was to say, all right, we will give you a Kairos standing. In other words, we will give you affirmative action. That is to say that we will not expect you to get an A. We will not expect you to be on time. We will not expect you to hand in your papers on time. We will give you the same opportunity at entrance or job opportunity or salary if you get a C when everybody else has to get an A. We will respect your Kairos. It called affirmative action. It was the most destructive and insulting thing I've ever heard of. The worst thing I've ever seen. And then from there, the civil rights, which was the public complaint about the lifestyle that were, if you will, a part of Blackianity. So I think that if we're going to understand, if we're going to be able to move forward as a people, first of all, we need to, God has sent me. You're not black. We need to stop calling ourselves black and then drop Blackianity. We're Hamites. That's number one. We got to stop identifying ourselves to the religion of Blackianity, mixed with Christianity or Islam or whatever. We have got to completely rid ourselves of Blackianity and recognize we got to step up to the rest of the world. I said the other day, that all of the progress that the Hamite people, now they're black people, African Americans and Negroes and colors, all the progress that they've made on the world scale has been under the supervision of white, either Shemite or Jewish people. Now, that's not something that people want to say here. In fact, most of what I'm saying, nobody wants to hear. At least black people don't want to hear. But if all white people, if a spaceship arrived from, Zamunda and picked up all the white and Jewish people and took everybody white and Jewish out of off the planet from America and left only black people here, we would descend in 10 to 15 years, look just like the nations of Africa. Not clean, no clean water, poor hospitals, poorly run neighborhoods, crime running off the charts, no real movement and investment. All of the progress that Africans have made, Blackianity people have made, has been under the leadership and direction of the Japheth man. And his greatest progress has been in America. And that's why he wants to stay here. He may bitch and moan all day long about police brutality or about racism, but I guarantee you he ain't going back to Africa. He ain't gonna never say, well, listen, I want to go back to Africa. He'd rather go to jail than go back to Africa because he knows where black people are in rule. And by the way, culture shock. When I arrived in Monrovia, black people were running everything. He doesn't want to go back there. And those in Africa want to get here. As much as Black Lives Matter marches up and down, and by the way, that leads me, I'll come to that in just a second. Let me just hit it now. Black Lives Matter is the Vatican, is the Pope, is the Holy Grail of Blackianity. It has now evolved to a national, if you will, grip on humanity. Black Lives Matter is Blackianity at its highest nth degree. You can't find more Blackianity in Black Lives Matter. And all of what I said about Blackianity, that they live in Kairos, they live in a different planet, they live in a different world, they have a different mindset. It is a religion. And it is not that they just mean, it is their spiritual objective rejection of the white world. It's rejection of Kronos. Blackianity, it's a religion. Black Lives Matter is the epitome of Blackianity. And it's growing. Like the man who claims this fish broke his reel. And this is our dilemma. Now the Lord has sent me here, and I know the things I say that people that are Blackianity don't want to hear it. But this is a massive sausage brain psychological problem. It is massive. The 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, all the civil rights, affirmative action, and all the other programs have only made his condition worse. He's not gotten better. He's not improved. He's gotten worse. And I said if you can read, you ought to thank a teacher. If you feel safe at night, you ought to thank a police officer. But really, black folk ought to thank white folk that they're in America, because they could be in Africa. And they'd be a whole lot worse there. You ought to thank white folk. The fact that we're here, the hell with all this business about Black Lives Matter, the hell with that. White people, thank y'all for letting black people who are rejected by the rest of the world. And even Mexicans reject. The black people don't want to have nothing to do with the culture. Mexican father don't want no black man marrying his daughter. And then he comes up with rapping music, cursing out his mama, his sister, and gets billions of dollars to do it, and then moves into the white neighborhood as he does it. Mexicans don't want you marrying their daughters. Mexicans don't want you bringing in half-breed children. Now, they really are, because they're all Hamites. But it's this segment of religion called Blackianity that must be dealt with. I'm going to ask you to understand a couple of things, and I'll recap and I'll let you go. That black and African Americans, and not necessarily Negroes or colors or prior to that slaves, live in a different universe. They live on a different planet, and they have a religion. They have a religion called Blackianity. And they respond, what we see going on between black folk and white folk is not racism, it's simply rejection of each other's lifestyle. And that's when you bring it down to its simplest denominator, that there's a rejection. People reject the way black folk live. They accept their sports, they accept the fact that their bodies are more meaningful than their brains. Now, I know that's, again, difficult to, but check it out. where you see black folk most prominent and most successful and most overcoming is when their bodies are involved in things such as sports, activities, that kind of a thing. Where their bodies are involved, not their brains. Where their brains are involved, they are the least prominent. Where their bodies are involved, what's hard to, beat them on the basketball court or the football. It's hard to beat them there. But put them in the classroom or the chemistry lab, then you can beat them. They're most powerful with their bodies and not their brains. Now, I know how difficult that is. I understand. But the reason why I have the courage and the conviction to say it is because I also have the cure. I have the healing of their brains. I have the healing of their blackianity. I have the healing of their dilemma. I have the healing. I got the word of God in my mouth. That's why. I'm not saying this because I'm looking for people to be angry with me for the rest of the world. Everybody black and anybody related to black be angry with me for the rest of my and hate me to no end. I'm saying it because I got the word of healing in my mouth. I got ATLAH. I got healing in my mouth. That's why I'm saying it. I'm not saying something because I want to stir a fight. I got the answer. I got the healing in my mouth. But you cannot heal a problem that's not diagnosed. He is in trouble. You better not try to correct him. You better not try to focus him. He's Kairos. He rejects the norms that makes the rest of the world builders of the Eiffel Tower, the Brandenburg Gate. He rejects that world. He rejects the world that builds great skies. He rejects that. He rejects the world of building great communities. He rejects that world. He rejects the world of discipline. He rejects that world. He rejects it. And by rejection, it doesn't just casually say, I disagree with it. He rejects it to the point, if you expect that of him, you are going to get a fight. If not, he will kill you. Rather than step up and accept the rest of the world easily operates in. And I say this again, because God has sent me to say these things. I got the healing in my mouth. No, it's not. You haven't heard of Martin Luther King didn't have the word. He was just a bigger complainer of blackianity, but he didn't have the healing. Yeah, he brought Obama. 8 years Obama in the White House, and homelessness in Harlem is worse now than it ever did. Oh, Obama didn't cure homelessness. He didn't educate you. You don't have more businesses. 8 years Obama, and it's worse now. Everywhere you look now in Harlem is more poverty across black America than ever before. Obama was not a healer. He didn't have a word in his mouth. He was a puppet for Wall Street, using the black vote to shovel money into Wall Street. I got the word of God in my mouth. I've got healing in my mouth. I ask for your prayers. Those of you who are offended by what I said, you're only offended because you know it's true. And I'll say to you, if you have a job, if there's a Japheth man, I mean white man, or a Shemite man, a Jewish man, that lets you work for him, you ought to thank him that he tolerates you. It does, because you don't know you don't know what a problem you are, and he's got to pay you too. They actually got to pay you, but yet he's willing to try to reach out. And many times he gives you just assignments that he feels that you're only capable of handling, because if he asks you to step up, you're going to reject. But I'm asking people, pray for me. Please pray for me. Don't hate me. I'm the Lord's servant. Don't hate me. I've not said to you one thing that you yourself do not know as true. Don't hate me. Help me. And help me help those that desperately need to step on the same planet as the rest of the world. I'm James David Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.